you so much for joining us today, right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. We love to hear from you. You can find us at naturalnurse.com. And we have so many ongoing classes and workshops that you may want to join in on. And, you know, with the challenges we're having in today's world, there's also benefits. For instance, there's so many more things that are available from wherever you are, such as online classes and workshops. And a lot of the offerings we have are free. The other advantage is, let's say you miss something, well, now it's always, Zoom recorded and you could go at another time. For instance, just coming up, we have The Power of Food, a guide to restoring mind, body, and soul through nutrition. And that's an ongoing series, which is completely 100% free to register. And you can go to it. Just go to naturalnurse.com. And then if you go right to the top, you'll see that Power of Food. And it has a registration link, very easy to access registration link and totally free. And then you get an email every day about a different speaker. Mine is coming up, I believe, December 1st, but everyone's interesting. And then we have one on herbs for the spiritual season. This one is excellent because you can get CE credits for licensed massage therapists, registered dietitians, registered nurses, nurse practitioners, and midwives. And, plants have been used throughout the ages and even in prehistoric times during this period of time, a lot of which is for magic. And that's a really good way to look at it. And that's coming up very shortly, and there are 3 CE credits for taking that class. So if you are a professional and need credits, you can take it. If you're someone who's just interested in the magical use of herbs in this holiday season, you can register for it. And then we have one called Mental Health, Maintaining Stability on a Rocky Road. That's another big one, and it is also free. And you can join us for that. Like, what can you use if you're feeling shaky, if you're not sleeping well, if you're under extra stress? What natural herbs and therapeutics might you want to initiate and use in your life, which are well documented and evidence-based in mainstream medical literature? How much to use, how to use it, how to try it, and how much might it help you. And it's a good thing to do before you go for those prescription anti-anxiety medications, which are off the wall now in terms of people trying them, even who never have. Then we have a free webinar coming up called Herbal Manufacturing Legal Consideration. Have you been thinking maybe of going ahead and offering a natural product that you made? Maybe you made something as an arts and crafts product. Well, you need to know the rules and regs. Like, at least find out that if you see a red light, you're supposed to stop. And a lot of people don't. And when the FDA comes knocking on their door or sends them a love letter, which is not too lovely, then they're freaked out, and then it's late, and then it costs millions of dollars, and most of them have to just pull the plug on the entire business they invested in. So find out, and that's the best way to do it. And today we are so happy to have as our guest George Paraskevakos, and he is an MBA. We'll be calling him George during our lecture today, although there are many links where you can find out more, such as the International Probiotics.org website. And George is Executive Director of the International Probiotics Association, the IPA, whose mission it is to promote the safe and efficacious use of probiotics throughout the world, while being the global voice of probiotics. As a probiotics expert and scientific strategist, he has developed international outreach programs for regulators and educational platforms for healthcare providers and consumers. Since his designation as executive director, he has grown the association to over 110 companies worldwide. And he's also on the advisory council for the Center for Digestive Health at Rutgers University, my alma mater, and also the Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine and Health Sciences. So thank you so much for being our guest today, George.
Thank you for having me, Ellen. Glad to be here.
And no disrespect, but pronounce for us your last name so everyone at least has heard it correctly.
No problem. It's Paraskevakos.
And is it fine with you if we refer to you, even though you are the executive director of the International Probiotics Association, during our show today, we will go with George. It's just a little easier.
Not a problem. Not a problem whatsoever.
Now, probiotics has become really a buzzword. Since I've been doing natural medicine, that started in 1964. I used to make my own yogurt with my own goat's milk at my own farm. And, things have moved ahead so far that now, like every other commercial on TV is touting all kinds of pills that are probiotics. So is the truth somewhere between those two?
So probiotics, you're correct. They've gotten so much attention, Ellen, in the last year or couple of years, but especially this year with what's going on, a pandemic and such, only because of the research tied to it. But probiotics have been around a very long time. From thousands of years ago, when lactic acid bacteria was being used to ferment foods and preserve foods, to fast forward today and all the science that has come out, there's a lot of very, very beneficial health outcomes that have, that come from using probiotics. So, yes, it is something of a buzzword, and there's a lot of marketing around products with probiotics. But there's a way to also understand what are the good products that are out in the marketplace as well.
And that's a big deal because it used to be, in the old days in the health food store, you had to go, I'm talking about in the 68, 69, there were tiny little health food stores around somewhere. And in the back, there'd be this big refrigerator that you open with this clicking thing. Most of our audience doesn't remember. And in there would be little jars of probiotics that had to be refrigerated. Now we're talking about stuff that's at every major pharmaceutical outlet, CVS, Rite Aid. I'm not promoting any of them, but it's completely mainstream now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So what is the consumer to do to understand, what really is going to be the best one, or does everyone need any?
So there's a few questions in there. I like them all, and I'll take them one by one. So what is a consumer to do?
Yes, that's the question.
First off, internationalprobiotics.org. Go to our website, member companies, IPA, they're vetted, they're well in good standing. The products that are on the shelf and commercialized from our members are basically products that have been, vetted and looked at or regulated by the FDA and FTC. They follow guidelines, the GMPs and such. So that's one particular area. The other is also to look at the label. If you look on our website, we have an infographic on what to look for on a label for a probiotic product. Five main things: CFUs, an expiry dating, storage conditions. All these things you can download off an infographic that we have. So when you walk into a store and the items that you have in front of you, and there's many to choose from, at least you can tick off some areas that, this particular labeling infographic we have on our website can help you discern what are the, quality probiotics or the probiotics that are respecting the GMPs and the guidelines on the shelf.
So that's very good information. Now, There's a lot of hype on taking probiotics, and, they've really become very, very, very popular. How much scientific evidence actually backs up that wide range use?
I'm glad you asked that, because we published a research paper a couple of months ago showing, and we looked at only, 2 specific websites which actually probiotic research and clinical research in humans are registered. And there's only 2 databases. There's many. There's a slew of databases out there that companies can register, clinical research. But just the 2 turned up over 1,600 clinical trials that have been conducted in humans with probiotics. many different indications, but the classical ones are always the same: GI health, or GI addressing GI type conditions, and immune or immune support type conditions.
Well, those are two really big things right now, especially when you're talking about support immune health. Because just, in this particular genre of time, being at the pandemic, but really at any time, we want to support our immune system. It's our natural defense. But when we're talking about immune health,
Yes.
Let's go deeply into that. How would probiotics in general, or perhaps specific probiotics, be useful?
So I'll come back to what's going on today, with this, which is a needed approach to try and get the pandemic under control. I'll come back to it. But the way it's a simplistic mechanism of action. You take a probiotic, it gets to the site of action, which is your gut. That's when it starts to work. It finds its best conditions, so it proliferates, making sure that with the good and healthy foods that you put into your system, it feeds off those types of foods, prebiotic type foods, fibers, different types of carbohydrates, and the bacteria grows. And as it grows, it starts to modulate the gut. And then when it does that, the gut talks to the rest of the body and starts to bolster our immune system. So it's a very simplistic way to underline how it works, but at the same time, there's a lot of research showing that. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds with the science and confuse people. How is that important to today's day and age with the germaphobic type of existence we're leading? It is needed, I would say, recommendation from CDC and FDA to make sure that, we stay clean. Hygienic is important, washing our hands, distancing and such. But that goes against what we were professing 10 years ago when we were saying, no, you can't be living in a bubble, because what you're doing is you're not exposing yourself to good bacteria. You're not exposing yourself to all these different types of situations like viruses or fungi that come at you. And that's when your body can recognize these things, then it can also build defense systems against it. So here we are in this germaphobic time, which is needed to keep the virus away from us, but at the same time, we're robbing our bodies from good bacteria. I have 3 recommendations I can always, I tell people, because of this germaphobic existence or this bubble type of existence that we are, is so we're quarantining. A good way to try and introduce bacteria, because the more diverse bacteria our system understands, the better we can get our immune system to work. So open a window, go outside, take a walk. That'll displace a little bit the air, and it'll displace the bacteria that we're exposed to. Make sure you eat. The second is make sure you eat healthy, good foods, not packaged foods, not foods with a label that has items on it as long as my arm. Prebiotic foods, good, protein, starches. And then the third way is to supplement with a probiotic. These 3 go-to, I believe, recommendations that I like to tell people are simplistic, but at least it'll expose themselves to bacteria and kind of take care of this germaphobic type bubble existence that we're leading.
Well, there's a big, I'd like to explore that statement a little bit, George, and we are here talking today to George Paraskevakos, and the best place to find out more information about what we're talking about today, of course, this very show will be archived on our site so you can revisit it, but also internationalprobiotics.org. But what you just shared is quite fascinating. Why don't you go a little bit more deeply into that?
With what's going on with germophobia?
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're talking about germophobia, everybody's into germophobia. And what does that do? I really wonder about that, because my own children, we grew up on a farm, and they ate a lot of dirt. You know what I mean?
Yes.
and they never were vaccinated. That was my personal choice. I'm not being political there. And, really, I have to say, any little illness we got, I dealt with natural foods, herbs, and homeopathics. And they literally never had an antibiotic. And all that seems to be going in a vastly different direction now.
It is, Ellen. And, I'll tell you one thing. We're starting to see all this increase or rise when it comes to, allergies and allergic type conditions is because we tend to live too cleanly, eating dirt. I remember, used to do that very often as a kid. But like you said, it's all about exposing our bodies to different microbes. It's all about, having diversity. The research shows the more diverse our gut is, the more bacteria in our gut, the healthier, our GI is, and the healthier our immune support is. If you think about, as we arrive in this world, there's an exposure to, if it's a natural, depending on the birthing mode, there's an exposure when you go down the natural childbirth route, there's an exposure to bacteria immediately. You get seeded from your mom, as you traverse and arrive through the vaginal canal, and, you're gulping bacteria because there's 90% of the vaginal flora is lactobacillus. After that, you're exposed. If you're on your mom's, there's been swabbing of, the mom's breast, the breast milk. It's all bifidobacterium that's there as well. So from the get-go, it's been proven and shown science is such an important element to be exposed to bacteria because it helps educate or train our immune system of what's good and what's not good. Now, talk about germaphobia. The percentage, I think, is 1% of all bacteria is bad. And yes, the bad bacteria can get you sick. But the more good you put into your system, the more support you'll have in fighting the bad and fighting off the bad. I'd like to use an analogy because our gut microbiome is very specific to all of us. It's as specific as our fingerprint or our DNA.
Oh, wow. So that's very interesting what you're just saying there also.
Yes.
If we're talking about individualized microbiomes, that's another whole thing, like you just said, similar to a fingerprint.
Exactly. And it doesn't necessarily, so whatever you have in your microbiome versus your neighbor versus your partner, your husband, your cousin, it's very, very different. So we don't necessarily have all the same gut microbes, the same bacteria. So I think if you introduce bacteria into your gut, it helps bolster fighting the bad bacteria. It helps bolster against, the bad microbes, that 1% that could get you very sick. So it's like a party. Once bacteria enters your GI, it's a fight for a spot, inside your intestinal tract. Like at Christmas, trying to find parking, in the mall. It's the same story. They're trying to find a spot and make their claim for that particular, time that they will be in your GI. So the more diverse you are, the more bacteria you introduce into your GI, the stronger you become, and your immune system, can, fight off what's going on today, but also, fight off the bad. So
now, is there a way that someone would get a test to see what their fingerprint microbiome might look like, and then try to, attack it in various ways, such as taking individual products available or, having some other food that has that kind of bacteria? Like, how would someone find out their individualized microbiome?
So we hear a lot about individual nutrition. We hear a lot about, making supplementation specific, and not only supplementation, but diets and what we follow and what we eat, making it specific to us and what we require. There's no specific test that will tell you what's missing, but there are tests out there that can tell you what you have. And don't forget.
Oh, there are. So let's talk about that. What would those tests be called?
I don't know specific brand names, but
Okay.
you can find them on the internet. Basically, they're tests that you swab. It's a fecal swab. You put in a test tube, you send it in, and they send you back a report, and they can tell you what is it that you have in your gut microbiome, what type of bacteria you have at that moment in time, because that changes depending on what you eat as well, what you feed it, what you're exposed to. So in essence, by knowing what you have, you can then think about what you can ingest or take in to add to it, to become diverse again. I cannot stress diversity being such an important element to helping, our GI health and our immune support. So you can help tailor what's missing or what's not in there by adding different types of foods, by adding an increased amount of fermented foods, and to eventually also supplement with different probiotic products.
Wow. And it's just amazing that there's a whole association, the International Probiotics.org Association, that really takes care of bringing together the science on all of this.
Yes, we do. We do have a lot of published articles. We do have a lot of, if you will, white papers, technical papers, as we call them, and they're in different realms of our, existence. So we have scientific papers, we have, papers that come out on regulations, and that's important too, because I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, you're not really regulated," and that's not a true statement, and we can get into that afterwards. We have papers that we publish on, standards and what type of analytic methodologies. So our website contains all these papers. It contains all these infographics that you can download, and learn some more if you have interest to, or if you want to know what are the types of probiotics that you should be taking when it comes to what's been published, from standards, from science, and so forth.
Wow, that is fascinating information. Well, we're going to take just a little break right here, Thomas, and we're going to go to a segment that we have called the Natural Medicine Chest. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with Mr. George, and we're talking about the International Probiotics, such an easy name to remember, internationalprobiotics.org, that has all kinds of free information so you can know the real deal about something that has become widely promoted, but is it science or is it hype? And our guest today is helping us decipher those things. We'll be right back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. Again, thank you for joining us right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And I would like to invite you to join us on our website, naturalnurse.com. And from there, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and all kinds of different places, etc. So you certainly can, fish around there. But right on the website at naturalnurse.com, there is so many free things available to you. Like, for instance, a link to our program right here that we're doing, and also you can find that at prn.fm, because all these shows are archived. We actually have hundreds of shows archived and also searchable. So if there's a topic you're interested in, now this is a radio show, but I think it's also called a podcast. I'm going to have to talk to a younger person and find out what is the difference between the definitions. I think it's that the radio show we're doing live, and then later it's a podcast. I don't know. Am I right? Who knows? Anyway, tons of information available to you and lots of classes. Some of our up-and-coming classes include the legal aspects of marketing all kinds of natural preparations. like our guest just talked about, there are regulations. If anyone says these things aren't regulated, they are wrong. So if you're thinking of offering any kind of natural or herbal preparation, learn the rules first and then decide if that's something you want to get involved in. That's coming up as a free presentation through the American Herbalist Guild. We also have one coming up on the magical use of herbs throughout the holiday season. And that class offers CE credits for nurses, nurse practitioners, licensed massage therapists, and acupuncturists, and RDs and nutritionists. Perhaps you need some credits to finish off for the year, and maybe you want to learn about the magic use of herbs in a certified course. By the way, you can take the class even if you don't need the credits. There's a slightly lower fee if you don't need the credits as well. And then we have other free ones coming up. Just go to naturalnurse.com and go to calendar. That's where I list my classes. And you can also get on the mailing list so that we email you updates, both about classes and other pieces of information. So thank you so much for joining us. We have about over 300 people who have been downloading these shows. So thank you so much, and we'd love to hear from you. And our guest today is George Paraskevakos, and he is an MBA Executive Director of the International Probiotics Association, IPA, and on their website at internationalprobiotic.org. You can find out so much information. He also has posts at Instagram.com/probiotic_man. I don't know, maybe there's a link at internationalprobiotics.org, and we'll also have it on our archive so you can instantly find him on so many different places. And so thank you so much for being our guest today and for giving us all this great information. Now, let's talk a little bit, George, because we're talking about probiotics. And let's talk about antibiotics, because people are very familiar. As I said, my own children have never had one, and they are 45 and 42. So we're talking about a long time going back where I would prefer not to use them.
That's rare to hear of someone that has not had at least one dose or one course of antibiotics prescribed to them. That is super rare. It's interesting. But yeah, I'd like to talk about this. This is such an important topic, and I'd like to bring it up. First, we're starting to see doctors understand how, what probiotics or how probiotics can help when they're actually prescribing antibiotics. Antibiotics is something we need. We have a certain condition, an infection, what have you. We need this to help us fight that infection. If a natural route might not work. But at the same time, an antibiotic not only gets rid of bad, but also destroys all good bacteria. And I like to reference a book which was authored by Martin Blaser. He's a very renowned researcher. He's the chair of the Department of Medicine at NYU. The book is called Missing Microbes. I'm not sure if you've had
What a great name. No, Missing Microbes.
Yes.
Oh, that's a wonderful name. Okay.
It is. And it talks about the overuse of antibiotics in today's society and how it's fueling the increase of different types of disease conditions, such as, intestinal bowel disease or diabetes or allergies. A lot of the allergies are linked to these missing microbes. But it's very significant to mention, and this is in the research, it's not something that we're guessing at, but antibiotics, even one course, can make certain bacteria in your gut disappear for prolonged periods of time. Even at some points, not even let them come back. These are more rare cases, but some of the bacteria goes away, some of it doesn't even come back. So, antibiotics, like I said, I don't want to say don't use them. It depends on its case specific, but at the same time, if you take a supplement of probiotic, it'll help you replace some of the good bacteria that the antibiotic is getting rid of for that particular moment in time. And we're starting to see...
One second, I do have a question about that.
Okay.
Because clients often ask me, if they are taking an antibiotic, let's say at 9 a.m., or it's twice
Mm-hmm.
a day, whatever. Would you suggest, or does the research suggest, that they take a probiotic, and that would be an external pill of some kind or a powder mixed in water, at the same time or a different time of day? Because wouldn't the antibiotic also possibly kill that positive probiotic?
Yes, and that's a good question because a lot of the research is suggesting to take it in between your antibiotic dose. So after a specific amount of time has passed and before the next dose, to take it somewhere in the middle. So this way, the antibiotic it is not killing off what you're putting in at the same time. So what I wanted to add was that we're starting to see the healthcare community, the doctors that are actually prescribing antibiotics, we're also starting to see them talk to their patients about probiotics and how they should also supplement with probiotics because of, the side effects of an antibiotic.
So isn't that exciting? That's only happened, I would say, clinically over the last few years. But I'm totally excited about that because, especially, I'm very involved in various clinics here in Broward County, where I live in Florida. And actually, some of the more broad-minded and truly educated, scientifically educated health providers have worked with their pharmacists, their in-house clinical pharmacies, to actually carry probiotics. So if they write it as a co-prescription along with an antibiotic prescription, it is covered by health insurance.
Oh, that's good to know. That is great news. I didn't know that probiotics. I've been talking to different, HMOs and healthcare organizations that actually, reimburse these things. I didn't know that probiotics, as they are regarded as a supplement, or any type of supplement, were actually reimbursed or refunded. So, but that's great news. That's really exciting.
It's a tricky way. It's a tricky thing, right? Because it has to be in the pharmacy that the doctor writes a prescription for. They can get it at that pharmacy, and if those two things are in place, and sometimes that's just like an in-house, with pharmacies run by some of these really community health-based organizations, even within Broward County. So I would say that's a major step in the right direction.
It is, and that's good. If doctors are working with pharmacists to be able to, address a situation like this, that means the doctors are starting to, buy into what's scientifically available.
Wow, what a powerful statement. Wait. I can't let you just slide with that one. Do you hear what you just said? You said that it's a good sign, yet it's unusual for doctors to be buying into scientific evidence. That's kind of a scary statement.
It is, because think about the prescription medication which is given to patients. It's trials which are conducted in thousands of people, where you have to have proven safety and whatnot. And also you have to also have the condition that the particular prescription medication is being written for addresses the situation, the disease, what have you. But in the same light, you have a probiotic, which is a supplement. It's not the same. A drug, if it's not properly researched, can kill somebody with one dose. If there's not known, if the side effects or the adverse conditions are not properly researched, it can have some very, very critical implications. Whereas a probiotic, which is a supplement, has been in our food supply for thousands of years, has been used for fermentation purposes, for preservation purposes, is around us, is in what we consume, is on the fruits and vegetables. Microbes are in fruits and vegetables, are in yogurt, are in cheeses, are used to produce these types of foods, is known for its safety. The requirement is not as high as you're researching a prescription drug. And that's where we hear sometimes, they're not safe or they're not properly researched. They're researched as a supplement. The clinical research is conducted as a supplement to help, support a situation. Hence, it is not, a supplement doesn't have the same requirements as a prescription drug. So the doctors will always revert back to what they know and what they've been taught in school, which is, drugs have thousands and thousands of people in trials and years and multi-millions of dollars of research thrown at it. As a probiotic is not in the same space. It's not, as a supplement, it's not a prescription drug. Yet, probiotic dietary supplements or probiotic foods are regulated. They are safe to take every day. So the statement that they are not regulated, it's a misconception. What we see published is articles which are comparing probiotic research to a prescription drug. So this is something that people need to think about when it comes to when you read statements like this, which are, again, I wouldn't say mistruths, but they're not accurate and they're misconceptions because they're regulated as a supplement. And there is legislation. The FDA has legislation. I can quote that legislation, but it might mean nothing to the consumer. But there's GMPs, which are good manufacturing practices, which overlook how a probiotic is actually manufactured. And then you have the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, DSHEA, which overlooks all supplements in the U.S. And then if you make, claims which are outlandish, then you have to deal with a different entity, which is the Federal Trade Commission. So there's a lot of oversight, and there is strict government regulations when it comes to, the different types of supplements that hit the market.
That's so true. And let's go back in time in terms of cultural expansion. How many different ethnic areas, countries, cultures have used probiotics, especially in terms of food, like a regularly consumed food within their normal diet?
Yes. Like I said, thousands of years, as early as there's been indications historically, as early as the Egyptians and the Romans, that they had lactic acid bacteria used for preservation purposes. Probably in modern day, one of the first, and it's the first articles or papers that I read was from Elie Metchnikoff. He's a Russian-born scientist that noticed that peasants at the time, it was the turn of the 1900s, were consuming cheeses and yogurts, were outliving royalty, who were in this cleaner type situation, and they should have outlived people that were quote unquote not in the most cleanest conditions. So after doing his research, he realized that these foods that were loaded with great microorganisms and bacteria were helping the prolongation of life. They were going against the putrefaction factors that I would say the more rich people were going through. So that's as turn of the century, 1900, early onset research. That's from knowing, and then there was also Pasteur, who also did some research regarding bacteria and the fermentation, of alcohol. And so the research also goes with the time and the technology. If we fast forward today, we're able to kind of dig as deep as the DNA of the bacteria. So we know in terms of like what are the different DNA strands and so forth. So this is the regulations which are formed around what the technology has allowed us to look at. But to come back to what you originally said, bacteria and organisms have been used as far back into the ancient civilizations, and there's some historical evidence of that.
Yes, absolutely. So some of these things people may certainly recognize, and it's easy to catch as foods because people have heard of yogurt, for instance. And I always recommend non-flavored whole food yogurt, like organic whole milk. I mean, I made it myself. I raised my goats, I milked my goats, and I made yogurt out of my goat milk. And actually, my grandmother, who was from Greece, taught me how to do that. And that yogurt tastes absolutely nothing like, some commercialized stuff with chemicals and flavorings and all kinds of sugar in it. It's really a different thing.
I agree wholly, and I had the same experiences watching my grandmother back in her village, how she used to make it out of, just goat's milk. And I tell people, your yogurt shouldn't contain more than 2 or 3 ingredients. It should be cultured milk and cream, and that's it.
Right, and that is still really good. And then, of course, if we look at Asia, they have kimchi.
Yes, they do. It's funny because as I see the world, from my glasses, the cultures are so different. In the U.S., the preference to get their probiotic organisms are through supplementation, and North America in general, Canada as well. You go over to Asian cultures; they prefer the yogurts. They prefer the different types of foods that can provide that microorganism. You switch geographies. You go into South America or Middle East, and they prefer the fermented or sour milks. So their preference of microorganisms are different. So it's an interesting panoply of how different populations across the world take their microorganisms or their probiotics.
Right, and certainly even in, let's say, the USA and Europe, we're looking at something like sauerkraut, right? That's like Eastern European, sort of like kimchi. From Asia. But I have to say, beware, because if you're going to buy sauerkraut, which is widely available, even in a grocery store in the U.S., you need to read your labels, because many of the commercial brands have something in them called benzoate, which is not a good preservative to be eating. So, however, there's many other brands around that don't. So you need to read your labels carefully. Do you have any information about that?
I do. In terms of, all the foods you mentioned, the kimchis and, the any type of food that needs fermentation, pickles, the kefirs, the kombuchas, these are all foods that contain great, good bacteria, great organisms. It'll help, the diversity in our gut. But I'd like to also add, and what you mentioned, check your label. I'd like to also add, there's criteria that makes an organism actually that deems it as probiotic. There's certain areas that have to be ticked off on the box to make sure that these organisms can be called probiotic, and the label will be able to tell you which ones are fortified with probiotic, as the organism itself must be labeled to the strain level, and that's what the IPA professes. This is what will be able to tell you as an indication what, are you taking a food that has been fortified with probiotic.
Well, we're going to take a little break right here, and thank you so much for listening today with our guest, Mr. George Paraskevakos, and he is from the International Probiotics Association, and the website is internationalprobiotics.org in case you're interested in your probiotic. What one are you taking? Are you taking pills? Do they have additives? Are they the right strain? There's so many questions. Are you getting a good price? That's a question. So we'll continue when we come back. Right now we're going to visit other shows and promos right here on our wonderful home, our station, Progressive Radio Network. We'll be right back with more right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us right here on Progressive Radio Network. You're listening to The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. We bring you this show live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. But the good news is, even for years before our current state of lockdown world, even for years, we were bringing you this live, but also offering it anytime on the archive. So that's what's so exciting. Let's say you're just deciding to delve into using probiotics because you've suddenly heard that term, or someone you know wants to support their immune system, or is having digestive difficulties, or entering a new phase of life, such as being older or being born. We'll talk about newborns. Everyone has different requirements, but does have a natural relationship with their own, what we'll call the microbiome. That's another, I would say, tag word that has become more popular. So let's talk to our guest today, and our guest is expert in this topic. He is Mr. George Paraskevakos, and the place to find out more is internationalprobiotics.org. So thank you so much for joining us today, George. And let's talk about that. What about when babies are born? Are they born with an intact microbiome? And perhaps we'll define microbiome.
So, talking with different scientists from our, world, it's the science is kind of still out. A few years back, we thought, the baby was born into the world completely sterile. They were coming out of the mom's placenta, and it was completely sterile. There's some science now showing that no, it's arriving into the world. Like there is microorganism transfer from the mom to the baby while it's in the body of the mom. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be had in that area. That's ongoing, and it's showing differently. Upon arrival, the baby, whether it's a C-section or whether it's natural childbirth, its gut microbiome is relatively still lacking of organisms. As I mentioned earlier in the show, depending on how the baby arrives, it'll help shape and evolve the microbiome of the baby. So as it gets exposed to the mom and it exchanges with the different environment around it, its gut starts to populate with different types of bacteria. There's some research, and I'm not saying this, it's not an all-encompassing statement, but there's research that C-section babies later in life, because there is long-term research around this, might have issues with, different types of allergies that they develop, or have less immune systems, aren't as strong as natural childbirth baby. That's why she's, 7,000-8,000 babies in. What she'll do is on C-section babies, she'll swab from the mom and then swab the baby to make sure that, the baby is getting bacteria from the mom that it should. So as we grow and evolve, so does our microbiome. And that gives argument to, should you be taking probiotics that are different when it comes to age and gender and, conditions. So the research is showing that more and more that is the case. Like, for example, once we hit past 40, 45, we know that bifidobacterium genuses, start to go away in our GI tract. And bifidobacterium are linked to, very strong science on how it's required, especially as it's fermented deeper down in the larger intestine. It helps with immune conditions, but it also helps, in prevention of some certain disease states. Women, they have a whole different need or requirement, for types of bacteria. Children's the same, infants to adolescents. So, the more as we grow from baby all the way into older life, probiotic supplementation needs and different type of exposure to organisms becomes very different.
Well, thank you, George. And we're getting close to the end of our discussion today, but let me ask you, is more better? Like, should everybody go out and take 10 of these a day, or is there a too much here as well?
So that's a good question. More is better. I hear that often. It's not necessarily the case. You can't take too many. I mean, there's systematic reviews and published articles, scientific articles showing that probiotics are well tolerated and there's no case of adverse events like, in drug situations. What you might feel if you take too many is, some movement in your gut, but that, again, it's the, parking lot analogy. Bugs are introduced, they're different. So they're just fighting for their space. But in terms of, is more better? It should be tied back to science. The research should state if you have a probiotic for a specific condition, test it at that particular, CFU, colony-forming unit level. That's what you should be taking.
Oh, see, that's a new word. And often that appears on labels, and people ask me what that means, CFU.
Colony-forming units are how probiotics are measured, because a probiotic is a live organism. And the way live organisms are measured are by the different colony-forming units versus, let's say, a chemical substance or a vitamin or a mineral, which is measured in weight.
Or milligrams.
In milligrams, right? Exactly.
So that's something that people can learn more about, and you can learn so much more about this entire topic, which is obviously such an important topic with people worrying about taking antibiotics and not being exposed to their natural cultural foods, but eating things which are over-processed and therefore do not provide through the diet these. And I wouldn't say just eat junk food and take probiotic pills. No, eat healthy, eat probiotic foods. Include sauerkraut and yogurt, really clean yogurt, and kombucha. I don't love kombucha because there's a lot of sugar in there, but nonetheless, topic for another day. Pickles are another one, kimchi. And I want to thank you so much for being our guest today, George.
Dr. Kamai, thank you for having me. Really, really appreciate it, talking about my favorite topic.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us once again for another edition of The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z right here on Progressive Radio Network. You can find out more about our guest and topic today at internationalprobiotics.org. Visit it and add it to your favorites, and if you're like an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter or a LinkedIn, they're in all those places as well. And you can find them also through their website at internationalprobiotics.org. And please visit us and send us an email, a comment, a question at naturalnurse.com or Facebook, The Natural Nurse. So until next time, we're wishing you a wonderful day, a wonderful season, a wonderful Thanksgiving. And until the next time, we're hoping that you stay healthy.